What's going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today we'll be going over the Week 4 Power Rankings for the GBA Season 6. And unlike last week, I am not alone. I am here with Trav.
Hey everyone, I'm feeling a bit better. So I am back for this week, thankfully. So you don't have to listen to Berk's ramblings for an hour.
Hello, people like my ramblings and it was a half hour. So let's just get straight into our number 16, and we do agree with quite a bit on the list. The number 16, we have the Newcastle United. Sam, this week, the prep looked rushed. Just really rushed. No Suicune. I know some people are saying Suicune just run through the team. Suicune wouldn't just run through the team, but Tup does have a decent water weakness that you can take advantage of with Suicune. And he overpredicted a lot this game, especially in the early game around the Rotom. I mean, he's constantly switching, letting things get burned, trying to set up rocks, but then the Rotom is still there, and he's not making any attempt to actually kill the Rotom. It's just sitting on the field and being annoying. And he doesn't have a heal bell or, a status absorber to at least go into and prevent a lot of his mons from getting worn down. His whole team gets pretty much status, and he has no way of dealing with that. Granted, there was a little bit of early game hacks that made sure he stayed behind, but he was already behind that battle. He just doesn't really consider what his opponent's mons can do utility-wise. He subs when Liepard can easily T-Wave, and then he flamethrowers, has a Liepard, the Liepard's out, and he flamethrowers anyway, when he doesn't even consider this Liepard might have Encore and try to Encore him into Substitute. Those are some really common things that mon can have. I feel like he thinks several turns ahead, but it doesn't account for what his opponent can do in those turns. It's just, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and it doesn't matter what my opponent does, this is what I'm doing, this is my plan, but those can be changed very easily. You do have to think about the late game, but you also have to reel it back a little bit and think, what can my opponent do in those turns that I'm thinking about into the game? You see, he just didn't really do his research this week. I like the Bennett set. I think it could work. It can trap and kill, like he said, the Hippowdon. Unfortunately, Hippowdon didn't come this week. He tries to trap and kill the Licky Licky, and he does not even realize that the Licky Licky gets oblivious. He's just over-predicting a little bit too much. He's trying to make these aggressive reads when he doesn't really need to, and it really cost him, especially in the early game, and he wasn't able to bring it back towards the late game.
On those over-predictions, the early game in particular, he has Kyurem in against a Rotom, and says he has no switch-ins to a Draco Meteor, and then doubles, and I didn't really understand the logic behind that. If your opponent has no switch-ins to a Draco, feel free to click Draco, because even if something switches in, it's taking a huge hit, and then you can switch into your answer for it afterwards. It's difficult to say he lost this game at team matchup, but it was close, because his prep was just not on point at all. The live commentary was good to kind of show his thought processes, but I thought that in watching it, it was quite easy to see he doesn't consider all the options possible for the next couple of plays. And even though he had good sight of the late game, as you mentioned, he did really overthink things. He either overthought or underthought every play. There was no play where he sort of made the right middle ground.
Moving on to number 15, we have the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. So you can take Battler X.
The biggest thing is he seems to have a plan for Amon. The Sawsbuck set was on point. He said, I'm going to Swords Dance on the switch, and then I'm going to go for Natural Gift to either kill the Cofagrigus if it's specially defensive, or bring it down really low, and then I can finish it off and still have the Chlorophyll for that turn, even though if I, use Horn Leech and lose it afterwards, or whatever. That turned out perfectly in the game, really good, and then he says, right, okay, you've done your job and I can sack you off now. And I don't think that's the best mindset. You need to sack things sometimes, but I think he could do a better judgment of when you can sack something and what you can do to play around your opponent's mons a bit more, rather than just having a plan, cool, that plan is completed, and then letting that mon die. Easier to just preserve something when you have a really, really easy switch in.
Also Sawsbuck, so you just sacked off your own mascot.
Yeah, it's just brutal. And yes, I am admitting that Sawsbuck would have been useful. Shut up. The Pseudo-Sun team was interesting. It was probably a little bit too gimmicky and not enough on an actually practical set that could do work. I'm actually a big fan of pseudo-weather teams in the format when they can catch someone off guard and you bring in, but you need to be a bit more conservative in prep, I would say. I want to see the creativity. Bear in mind it's going to be really difficult to pull off. When you have Honchkrow in against Celebi, Chimp has been paranoid about steal coverage for Diancie since the start of the season, as you should be. If you have Celebi in against a Honchkrow, the mind games that play out in my head are Sucker Punch versus Pursuit, and Battler X seemed convinced Chimp would switch, predicting a Heatwave. So I don't think you needed to overpredict around that Celebi, and particularly you hadn't revealed you were Scarfed, so you probably would have predicted the Sucker Punch or the Pursuit. If you predict Pursuit, you're just going to stay in an attack, etc. So at that point you revealed you were Scarfed, but then went for the wrong move. If you have a slow mon that's a Scarfer, you can use it to just take out a threat when they're not expecting it, rather than reveal the fact that you're Scarfed and overpredict, predicting a switch.
Battler X has these really innovative sets. I really like the Sawsbuck. That was great. He had a good plan for it, but as I said, he just plan done, sacks it off, it's over. When you have a really easy switch into Tornadus being your Florges, The eject button with Heatran actually worked. And this was a huge improvement for Battler X. I think this battle was much better. It's that gimmicky prep. I think it's hurting him more than helping him, because we all like gimmicks, but at the same time, you need something that's really reliable. And I think a Pseudo Sun team with one Sun Sweeper, and that's what you're putting all the eggs in one basket, it just doesn't work as much. Battler X, the franchise might have had the curse lifted because of what Cooper did this week. So, just saying, he might start winning. Number 14, I have the Borussia Don fan. You have him at 12. So, Lars, I like the planning from Lars this week. It was risky. It was very risky. But he knows Mono well, and was able to speed creep knowing Mono well, which this is what I think Lars has done that I don't think really any other coach has done, which is he scouts out how his opponent plans.
I would like to just mention that George mentioned this week MV's love of sub Keldeo and a couple other things, so I think other coaches are doing it, it just wasn't as explicitly obvious in their team prep necessarily.
Drudagon dealt with a lot of mono special attack as well. That was a really great set. Everything else just really pretty much standard for Lars, not really too much. So he used that really well. And he held a good amount of momentum throughout the match. He used Alakazam. Well, Mega Alakazam is not a wall breaker. It is a very bad wall breaker, despite that 175 special attack. It is a good sweeper, because of that base 150 speed. And he showed that it can actually do things which I have not seen at all in the past several seasons. But really, not much could have been done this match. It was a very, very offensive match. Lars had to keep sacking things off just as well as Mono did, but he didn't see the dual Scarfers coming, which perfectly reasonable, because no one ever expects Scarf the Selgor. Alright, I'm going to say that now. No one ever expects Scarf the Selgor. This was a much better match than past weeks. It was really close, but that Selgor just stopped him. He's making a lot of assumptions based on the late game, and he thought he could have taken it from his assumption of what his opponent's team was, the fact that it was a speed crept to Selgor. It probably wouldn't outspeed the Alakazam. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for him, but it's good that he recognized that something in planning needs to change, because he's not been doing well these past weeks. Just like Tom, you recognize there's something going wrong here with my team planning, and I need to make a change and carry that out for the next weeks if I have a chance of bringing the season around.
I have Lars a lot higher because I think he actually played really well this week, and he's played pretty well every week. It's just he's always that little bit of a step behind everyone else. I really, as you said, like the Drudagon set, and I like the fact that it was different, because Lars does a lot of bringing the same or very similar sets every week, and he's brought Ruskin, Rocky Helmet, Drudagon a lot. I think the issue here was more of an issue with the team he decided to bring, or any individual play he made. And even though I've been saying he's played well, he's never made one of those, the things that would get on the top 5 plays or whatever, where he makes an incredible double or a prediction and just gets all this momentum. He's playing a long, slow game against people who are able to make those bold predictions and then get ahead of him.
At number 13, we have the New York Metapods. So, Dan's still reeling this season. He had a really greedy Altaria set, Dragon Dance and Cotton Guard. I understand the thought process, but still, that's really greedy to try to do in one match. The Toxic Spikes were really meh for Tom's team. Everyone's saying, but the Guts Machamp. I don't care about the Guts Machamp. The fact that Tom has a Rapid Spinner with Natural Cure and 3 defoggers, all immune to it. He has so much hazard removal. And one of those defoggers is a Magic Bouncer. So even still, there's maybe rocks, but even then, that's still going to be hard to pull off against Tom. And in the match, he just kind of gave Machamp the guts boost and a free hit off, which he thought about, but then I'm just going to go for Will-O-Wisp anyway, which you got to think of those things. Machamp hit hard with a knockoff, did 50%, a little over 50% to a Mega Altaria before Mega Evolving, so I do like the fact that Dan calcs almost every turn. It's good. Calc, make sure that you know what hits you can take, what moves are the best. He really misplayed with the Victini, but it was a misplay, but at the same time, because Tom had planned well for the Victini with his Cobalion, he likes to make these really, really aggressive plays. And then once he got bit in the ass for making those aggressive plays, it's okay, now we got to reel it back a little bit, not make so much aggression, try to play a little bit safer, which is good that he recognizes he's playing a little bit too aggressively. And I really think he just didn't have a vision of the late game, unlike Tom, letting Rotom get Toxic, which I know, Toxic Starmie, not so, but he let things get really worn down, and then just kind of let Xatu stall all over him. And Dan just brings bulk every week, and it's a problem when almost everything on your opponent's team outspeeds everything on your team. Tom, I think, had 5 things that naturally outsped all of Dan's team. You need Scarfers, not just you need instant speed, not just setup. And one last thing, he forgets about the Aerial Ace. I get you can forget about obvious things, but it was really obvious.
Yeah, the Aerial Ace thing was just an absolute brain fart. It happens to everyone at some point, is you just forget about a really obvious move, and then it screws you over. Medicham would have been really, really important in that late game, because it was the only thing that outsped the Xatu that he had left, and that would have stopped it from roosting. He did have a couple of good aggressive plays that worked out, which show why Dan has been successful in the past. It allowed him to get rid of Mamoswine when he stayed in with Dragalge, predicting Tom to predict a switch, etc. And those can be really nice, but most of the time he overpredicts rather than gets those right, and so he still have a couple of those thrown in there, but a few more middle ground players I think would help.
At my number 12 and your number 13, we have the San Jose Sharpedos. So why don't you take Tom?
The Cobalion set was perfect for the early game to allow him to basically neuter Victini as a threat. It means he can bait it to come in and identify straight away if it's scarfed, if it's special, if it's mixed, and fire off a powerful hit. And if it was Scarf Curate, for example, it just would have died to that Stone Edge. Even though he has Arcanine, which is debatably the best Victini switch-in. So knowing that Dan would expect Arcanine to be the switch-in, he ends up not bringing it, and so Dan goes, I can just bring in Victini and get a kill, but because of that Cobalion set, he basically removed it as a threat. Xatu did things, which is a sentence I'd never thought I'd say. I was really surprised at how well it handled Dan's team. He had a couple of over-predictions which set him back, mainly along with the Mamoswine, and he still has a couple of mons which he uses for what he calls scouting and information, and basically means they're the frontline people who you just throw out there as fodder to see what your opponent's going to do, and I feel like you could get more use out of those mons. I did listen to his team builder and his battle video where he talked about why he's using the Machamp in that way and how he thinks it fits his prep, etc. But I still think you're using it a bit too much as a switch into whatever the opponent's going to go for, just to scout sets early, and it's a bit of a waste of a mon. You can make, I guess, slightly risky predictions and go into something else assuming something about your opponent's set. As opposed to, you mentioned Lars assuming too much about the opponents. I think Tom doesn't assume enough and wastes a couple of mons trying to scout. He did have really good vision of the late game, going for Toxic with Starmie, recognizing that because his Xatu outsped, he could just roost all the rest of his team and heatwave the Ferrothorn. He continues to improve from the first week, and I think if he keeps going like this, he could actually make probably not a playoff push. It's probably a bit far-fetched at this point, but he could definitely be a competitive team, and if he keeps going for next season, then he's definitely going to be really good.
Tom, you didn't play like ass this week. Good job. I get Machamp's role and Mamo's role. They just always seem so damn underwhelming every single week. It's just something about Mamo. I swear. It's so good on paper, but it just never does anything. See, this is what happens. Good prep. Yes, Victini would normally scare out Cobalion, but, due to better prep, you could stay in and kill it. Or almost kill it, then set up rocks, and then let it die later. One thing though, it seemed like Rotom was kind of overlooked in planning. Like, he didn't really have anything to just kind of kill it. But he played well around it. He made sure to toxic it so he could stall it out late game. Tom is using his team offensively and effectively, and he's using his low tier picks well, which is really important. He gets a not big win in terms of like differential or anything, but a really big win for him just to show that he is actually in the season. And number 11, my number 11, and your number 10, we have the New Orleans Pelipers. This was a very different game from John than we've seen the past few weeks. Starting with the prep, he knew Mega Venusaur was a threat. It always is. And he's got a great mon that can easily handle Mega Venusaur, being Latios. So he preps Latios with no way to deal with Mega Venusaur. It's a Mega Venusaur, you need Psychic Stab. And really made the safe plays throughout that entire match. And he lost tons of momentum right at the beginning when he gives Pangoro a crazy threatening mon in absolutely free switch in to just deal massive damage. So he loses a bunch of momentum and then he just makes safe plays throughout that entire match. Doesn't predict Nick to do anything. And like I said last week, when you're behind, that's when you need to make the bold plays. That's when you need to come in and say, okay, I gotta make these stronger predictions, because if I don't, you play safe, you're not going to lose big, but you're going to lose. Yeah, if you play more aggressively, you're either going to win big or lose big. But when you're behind, you need to make those aggressive plays. You need to make those bold predictions, because that's what's going to get you back into the game. Bisharp shows that it's not very good. Surprise, surprise. Psycho Cut just... Wow, that did nothing.
It's like 20%. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a super effective... I know it's not stab, but that's still super effective, and... That's just... Bisharp, why are you so terrible? Oh, I know why it's terrible, but, you know. Yeah, this was just definitely a worse showing from John than the past weeks. The planning wasn't there. The playing wasn't there. He needs to reevaluate his game plan for these next coming weeks. See where he went wrong in the prep this week, where he went wrong in the planning this week, and try to fix that.
I think you pretty much covered everything I had to say there, in that it was just super, super safe. He never really did anything to gain momentum. Things like Lopunny with Fake Out, yes, it's a big risk if you don't click Fake Out to break Alakazam's Sash or do damage or whatever. But at that point in the game, you pretty much lost. Like, after a couple of times that it happened, you needed to pull a double or go for a turn trying to kill something on the switch or whatever it is. And no real plays at all to speak of from John's perspective. And the prep was underwhelming, honestly. Like, you mentioned the Bisharp and the Latios sets. Dragon Dance Latios is cool, but you basically had nothing really reliable for Venusaur. He had no real switch-ins to the Wall Breakers that Nick brought, but then again, no one does, because when you have Pangoro, Alakazam, and Darmanitan on the same team, and Kyurem Black on the bench, there was nothing he could really do there, so I would have liked to just see either go hyper offense or bring something, switch-ins to specific mons he knows he's going to struggle with, and then the rest offense, because you're not going to be able to switch into those things. The only way you beat them is by outspeeding them and killing them, or by setting up on a switch and just killing everything.
So, at my number 10, your number 11, we have the Philadelphia Scissors, so why don't you take Chimp?
Chimp, his team prep was pretty solid. Definitely he's using Diancie a lot better than I thought it could be used, honestly. One thing I definitely don't understand about his team building is, why is Steelix always there? Like, every goddamn week there is a Steelix. And, I mean, it hasn't been terrible. I understand it's his only electric immunity, but you can go without electric immunity some weeks. Like, it's not necessary every game. And it just seems to always be thrown on there as, this is going to be my Stealth Rocker. It has Raw, and then 2 attacking moves to do some damage, and I'm not sure it's always the best bring. He didn't have enough on his team for Heatran, in my opinion, which is one of those he identified it as a huge, huge threat, and then still didn't quite bring enough for it. If Battler X had brought a slightly different set, it could have actually just destroyed Chimp's team, which is a bit weird because it's a Rain team. He literally has a number of the best answers to Heatran in Politoed, Kingdra, etc., and didn't have enough for Heatran. I understand he didn't want to bring a Rain team this week, which was good prep, but you can still bring something to try and deal with Heatran a bit better. And one thing I would have liked is Earthquake instead of Protect on Scolipede. I understand the logic he was trying to go for, but I find with Scolipede, you can often get up a speed boost revenge killing something that you know is slower than you, so bring it in, because it's never going to be a sweeper mid-game unless you run Swords Dance. If you're running just offensive Life Orb, you want it to be sweeping late game. When things are worn down, you can bring it in, you can revenge kill one thing, get your speed boost, outspeed the rest of the team, and then just clean up. And for that you need as much coverage as you can. I would have liked to see Earthquake rather than Protect, just because you don't need Protect in that scenario. There are some scenarios where you would. I'm just not a huge fan of it on Scolipede in general.
You pretty much covered everything. Yeah, there's Steelix. There's always Steelix. I don't like Steelix. I never do. I like how he needs to know that has to play more aggressive to break apart Steve's team. Like, that was ever present in his mind. I need to play aggressive. I need to be on the offense, because if I let Steve take over, then I'm probably not going to get out of this well. He can tailor how he plays to his opponent, which is really good. And he used the Diancie really well. It just hits so hard, and it forces so many switches. So at number 9, we have the Utah Jasmine. Now, yes, Cooper brought Swagger this week. And no, I don't like Swagger. I absolutely hate Swagger. But at the same time, Cooper brought it with a plan. I think first I should explain why I think Swagger hasn't been banned yet. There was one time that a coach used it for confusion hacks. That was Season 1, and that was Steve. He used it Week 1, used it really well, got a big victory using his Clef Key, and then lost the next 9 games. So there's a curse with it. I think as soon as Steve used it like that, it's never really been used that same way, unless you're really kind of fucking around in a match like Cooper did in Season 4. Granted, Geo used it last season, but that was more for the +2 boost. But Cooper realized the odds of him winning. He recognized that Miguel probably the better player. He knows that Miguel doesn't deal with hacks well. He can throw Miguel on tilt, and to say that the mental game is not a thing, that you can't throw your opponent off the mental game, that's kind of the whole point of the format. Throw your opponent off his game by bringing unexpected things that your opponent is not going to be able to deal well. And what can't Miguel deal well with? Well, hacks. He used that to throw Miguel off his game. The rest of the prep was pretty solid. He recognized his limited switch-ins to Roserade and Blastoise, so he brought a AV Empoleon, so that was good prep. And Vacuum Wave on Glade, great. It was a close match. It was a very hacksy match, so that's why I didn't really move Cooper up that much, because I'm not going to say he used hacks to his advantage, I got to move him up a lot. It was really hacksy on both sides, and there's at any point he still could have lost, but because Miguel was playing on tilt, he was able to bring in aggro in the late game and then clean up with it. And one last thing, I know I said the prep was overall solid, there was one thing I forgot to mention, and that was Unaware Clef to deal with setup Talonflame with no moves to hit said Talonflame. Then that's not an effective stop to set up Talonflame, because you're still going to lose to it.
That was my big thing with his prep. When I say I liked a lot of it, I mean the same reasons that you did, is he went, it's going to improve my chances of the game if I just play for hacks. He's going to improve his chances of winning. And yeah, everyone hates Swagger, there isn't a single person alive who wants to sit there where you hit yourself in confusion and do huge damage. So it's gross to go against, but it's legal, and no one in the off-season fought really hard to get rid of it, so it stayed. So I think that was really smart prep on his part, same with the Vacuum Wave Glade that you mentioned, etc. But yeah, big thing, he really didn't have enough for Talonflame. Aggron kinda, maybe, sort of, not really. You have to rely on him not getting set up too far and you switching in at the right time, not getting hit by a Willow or a Flare Blitz or whatever. And Wheezing isn't a great check to Talonflame. Yes, I had Thunderbolt, and yes, got paralyzed 4 times in a row, I think. But, this game was mostly just Cooper doing what Cooper does, which is annoy the hell out of his opponents and then clean up with Aggron, which, seriously, why does he keep drafting Aggron? Anyway.
Aggron's amazing.
It's not terrible, but...
So, my number 8 and your number 7, we have the Real Moril. So, the other side of the battle, Miguel needs to build his own teams. Alright, I know a lot of the people in his front office, they're good builders, they're good battlers, but the thing is, like we said, it was hard to be given a draft and be able to do well with it. It's even harder to basically be given a team that you haven't built yourself and then expect to do well in the battle. It's you need to build your own teams. The front office is there to help and give advice and give set recommendations, but overall, it's got to be your team that you use. And he didn't do that this week, and I know he recognized that. You got to build it, and I'm not saying that the front office should be disbanded or anything. It's a great idea, but it should not be a supplement to your team building. It should be a complement to your team building. He got way thrown off by the swagger. I mean, everyone does. He decided to try to power through it instead of trying to play around it. Like, yes, the rocks were up, but you do have a Talonflame which out-prioritizes it. When you start playing on tilt, you start making the worst plays, and I know tilt is hard to play around. It's something you kind of have to try to do, because if you don't play around the tilt that you might go on, you're going to make the worst plays no matter what. People say I don't give enough credit for good prep. You know, Miguel said he was going to predict the vacuum wave, but were you really going to? And, like, to be fair, in all fairness, he did predict HP flying from Breloom in Season 4 for the Chesnaught, so, you know, he does predict kind of odd things, but still, overall, the swagger did not lose him the game. It didn't. Even after all that happened, he still had chances to win, setting up the Talonflame more, doing something like that, but when you play on tilt, those options become much less apparent. It's much less likely that you're actually going to see those options and be able to follow through with them.
That was probably the biggest thing with this match, is he let Cooper get in his head with Swagger, and I mean, that was Cooper's plan, and I guess it worked. But if Miguel watches this, he needs to go back and look at how he was playing. Like, when he used to play Showdown Lives and first couple seasons of GBA or whatever, that kind of stuff would piss him off, and then he'd go, okay, and he'd keep my head, what is my way to win here, even though I'm being hacked out of this game, or even though I'm playing against a stupid fat stall team, or whatever. And he managed to play around those kind of things. He managed to play around a lot of things really, really well. If people notice that, hey, he loses his head if I get lucky a little bit, they might be assholes and try and bring friggin' Bright Powder or Sand Veil or stupid things, bank on the chance that if he misses a lot of moves, he'll get angry, etc. I understand that he's, that's part of who he is. He used to play around it really well. I'd like to see that come back.
So at number 7, and you're number 8, we have the Pittsburgh Piratas, whatever. Go.
Tup should give up playing Pokemon and move to Las Vegas and play poker instead, because Jesus Christ, that man can bluff. Honestly, on Team Prep, I hate that Licky Licky set if I'm just looking at Team Prep, and then I look at the game and go, that worked. How did that work? I mean, it would have been better if it had something to hit the Crobat, like even maybe just T-waving it or whatever, but I mean, it dealt with the Bayonet perfectly, which I was surprised about. He also used Rotom very well. Rotom is a mon that's built to be an annoyance. Like, it's not bulky enough to be a dedicated wall in most matchups. It's not offensive enough to be a late game sweeper or anything like that. It's really good at just being just enough where it can live hits, deal some damage, status things, etc. And that's exactly what it did this match, and Tup played that to perfection. The end game, he could have potentially preserved differential by switching out Pidgeot, but I guess he didn't want Crobat to roost, which then could have potentially cost him another mon. He made safe plays most of the game, and then made a huge aggressive play, which doesn't look like one at first glance, which is bringing in Heracross on a Crobat, bluffing the hell out of the Scarf, and that worked really, really well. Overall, I really liked his playing and his prep this week.
The balls on Tup this match. We never saw this part of Tup before, but where did this come from? Like, I've never seen someone bluff something so aggressively and it works so well, but just bringing in a non-scarfed Heracross on Crobat. The balls. Just the gigantic balls. One thing I didn't like about team planning, though, the reasoning for the Licky Licky set, he needed the Heal Bell for the Sand Rush core. You changed the core. You didn't need Heal Bell as much. Probably should have changed the Heal Bell to something else because, you realized you didn't need it as much, so actually make the change. He didn't really make overly aggressive plays. Like, when Sam over-predicted around the Rotom, he just let Sam over-predict around the Rotom, made safe plays at that point because he was ahead. He can make safer plays, and then the bluff. Wow. I don't really know why he didn't speed creep the Mew with Lipard. It's something generally you do. And I think this match really showcased that Tup is definitely improving. I mean, I don't think the Tup of last season or the season before would ever make a bluff like that, so really good on that. And just as well, like that last turn Like it shows forethought for the best move he can make. Like he knows that Sam's probably not going to go for Super Fang against the Heracross that's kind of low on HP, and he's either going to Roost, in which case Earthquake will kill, or he's going to go for Brave Bird, in which Crobat will take himself out. So at number 6, we have the Boston Red Sox, and this was, I think, a really good game for Nick. Made some good early game predictions with Pangoro. I mean, just holy fuck, that thing hits hard. Drain Punch did 80% to an Umbreon, and then Ice Punch did what, like 95% to a Rotom Cut, so it just, goddamn. And I think that was like a defensive Rotom Cut too, so the eject button on Skarm actually worked. He was able to bring in Zam, get a lot of kills, and he's using Alakazam really well this season because it's a revenge killer. He's using it as a revenge killer, bring on something that's kind of weakened, doesn't matter if it outspeeds, and then just kill things. And once he realized that I'm probably going to have to save the Sash for Mega Lopunny, he makes sure to preserve it till the end. This week, he just put on so much offensive pressure on John. I mean, setting up for Alligator, just Scarf Darm, Pangoro, just so much power, and he's really able to use it so well to make sure that John stays in the back foot very often, and that he's forcing John to have to make the really, really bold plays to get back into the match. Really good game by Nick. Also, I love the nickname Aristotle.
Nick really didn't make any super aggressive plays after. Like, he made the prediction with Pangoro early and then just played safe the rest of the game because there was nothing else he needed to do. At that point, he'd blown a couple of holes in John's team. John was playing extremely safe and let him get all the momentum, and so, like you were saying, people need to make the aggressive predictions when they're behind. The converse of that is when you're in front, you can just make the safest possible play, because even if it doesn't go your way, even if they make a good prediction, you're still in front. And Nick did that really well, and it paid off for him. As you mentioned, just power. His team has so much wall breaking potential, and so he can use them as a pure revenge killer rather than bring a spec set and trying to wall break it all. He can just go, I'm just going to punch holes with my bear and fireball thing and just blow back any walls that try to switch in. He managed to preserve Zam's Sash really well. I actually didn't know if it was Scarf Zam or Sash Zam or what it was until the commentary, because I watched the game beforehand, just from the battle code. It could have been any set really, because all it ever did was come in, click one move, and then switch out to something to take a fake out. I also really like how he's using his wall breakers, which is bring them in mid-game and just punch a hole, whereas people seem to not be able to tell the difference between a wall breaker and a late-game sweeper. Something like Mega Lopunny isn't an amazing wall breaker, as you mentioned, Mega Alakazam. They're not actually great at taking down, just clicking one move and everything on your opponent's team just dies. What they are really good at is waiting till late game, outspeeding everything, and doing 50 to 60% to everything. Whereas the big wall breakers he had were just blowing huge holes in John's defenses. And after that, he just let John play safe and kind of cruise to it. Even though it was a relatively close game on differential, it was a fairly comfortable victory for Nick.
At my number 5, your number 4, we have the San Francisco Arcaniners. So why don't you take George?
George played MV, and MV brought sets. Honestly, there's not much else. There are things to talk about, but he basically just got completely outplayed by a Rock Polish Donphan, which he wasn't expecting. And I'm not going to criticize him for not predicting Rock Polish Donphan and bringing something to deal with it, because who predicts Rock Polish Donphan? What I will criticize him for is I would have I've had Nidoqueen in draft format, and I really like the coverage that it gets. And he didn't run much of that coverage. He ran his Dual Stab, which is really, really good, and then Dual Hazards. Didn't end up getting those hazards up, and if he'd had Ice Beam, that Rock Polish Donphan wouldn't have been a problem, because I don't think it would have OHKO'd, it had Sturdy regardless, but then he could have used Mach Punch to take it out. And it's things like that. I know he's a big fan of Toxic Spikes, and I'm not, and that's probably just an opinion thing, but Nidoqueen can do so much to most teams, and it's really, really good if you just bring, you can mostly just bring 3 coverage moves and just blow back most people's walls. He played around the Keldeo, he was playing really well early, honestly. He had a lot of the momentum until Haxorus came in. He predicted that Keldeo wouldn't be a choice, and then he'd probably go for a sub, and he could break it and then switch out. George, in his commentary, tends to be fairly retrospective. I know we get a lot of criticism for hindsight's 2020 and that kind of thing, but I honestly think in the scenario he was in, Body Slam was the best middle ground play. self-destruct was only good if you expected him to set up. And from the calcs, you would have gone, he's not Life Orb, he could be Lumber, he could be Scarf, could be anything, just not Banded, not Life Orb, not Soft Sand, basically is all he knew. The last thing is, this is the second time George has done this, is use a super effective damage-reducing berry, and then bring it in on the mon that he's trying to bait. And to me, that's too obvious. You're basically putting a sign up that says, I can take your hit and then kill you.
Yeah, you pretty much said everything. The one thing I wanted to say was his prep with Melodic. Yes, it's a physically defensive Melodic, but you look at the team, that's his really only wall. And you look at an other team, and he knows that he needs something to stop setup, and so he has Melodic, but you look at your opponent's team, and your opponent has so much setup, and you only bring Melodic, it's going to have to take pretty much every single hit that you can throw at it. And unfortunately, because of the fact that MV was really good with setup, Melodic's going to have to take some really big hits, and probably a little bit too early on, especially with the Haxorus. And the Melodic gets really whittled down, and then dies. Once that dies, then Rock Polish Donphan has no problem just kind of blowing through the team. It's good to have really good walls on your team, but it's not good to put so much pressure on them that if they get whittled down at all, you basically are going to lose the game, because that's what happened this week. You have to put less pressure on any individual mon and kind of spread it more evenly throughout the team. So at number 4, and you're number 5, we have the San Francisco Giants. Geo, one thing about planning, if you really decide to go gimmick, especially at the last minute, that's the stuff you need to play test. You can't go in with this really big gimmick and then just say, well, I think it's going to work. That's what you have to test. And I know he was really rushed for time because he was leaving for Europe. In the future, that's what you have to test, is big gimmicks. I know the playing and planning was rushed. It was very apparent when he played Fizz. The plan could have worked baton passing speed into not just Nidoking, but also Manaphy. Manaphy actually would have just punched a hole straight through Fizz's team, because you'll look, Manaphy has a lot of coverage, and it could have taken out down the Rhyperior, it could have taken down the Salamence, it could have possibly taken down the Canyon from where it was at. I don't know how much Ancient Power would do, but I assume it might.
Probably not much.
It might do enough. I don't know. And then he gets the boost. Boom. Easy.
Yeah, you just boost up to +6 with Ancient Power.
Yeah, no, that's...
And then win.
That's the easiest strat. He realized getting rocks up was important, but it's not just important for chip damage, but it's one of the best ways to scout for a Zoroark, especially if your opponent has a lot of flying mons. And he's very paranoid about the Zoroark, which you definitely should be. You should be paranoid. Is this a Zoroark? Then he misses the fact that Mence didn't take 25% on switch in, the fact that it went for knockoff, which is just... It's like... broadcasting, this is not a Mence, this is a Zoroark, and he just completely overlooks that. So this is what I was saying when it seemed like his playing was rushed, when he's just missing, like, there's little things that we've criticized, like, this was really obvious, and you can't miss those things, especially in future weeks. And he realized it later, but it was after the Zoroark had done quite a bit of damage to his team. Like I said before, even the rush prep, he still could have won if he baton passed into Manaphy, but he was rushing the plan, decided to go straight into his Nidoking when the Rhyperior barely took any damage. Once he lost the Nidoking, that was basically the plan was over. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you want to use one gimmick to try to win the match, and it doesn't work out, the game's over, basically.
I'd like to say, if you're going to go with a gimmick like that, just go all out and run, sub Payapa Berry or something on Zapdos, and get a +1 special attack boost in there as well, just to guarantee some more kills or whatever it is. The other thing with it is, Nidoking doesn't need to be a +2 speed to punch some holes, and you could have used it a little bit earlier without taking damage if you bring it in on a safe switch and that kind of thing. Overall, it wasn't really Geo's best match by a long shot, but I do like the creativity. I really enjoy seeing people trying to be creative with sets, and I think he can be successful with it, honestly, in future.
At number 3, we have the Tampa Bay lose weights. So why don't you take him, Mono? Yeah. Talk about Mono.
Mono is trash.
Alright, so at number 2... No.
Honestly, his prep was really, really good. And this is how you use a front office well, is he has someone who he knows preps similar to him. They have good discussions about this, and they've been doing this for quite a while now, through the other leagues that Mono has been in, the other leagues that Kyle has been in. They talk over their team prep together, and it's not a Kyle builds a set, sends it to Mono, it gets pasted onto the team. It's, I'm really struggling for another check to this thing, or I have a spare slot on my team and I don't know what to bring there, and then they talk about what they could put. And that led to him bringing the thing that won him the game, which was a choice Scarf Excelgor. He's continuing to show how he can use the walls really, really well. Granted, when I say all of this, he does have two of the best walls at getting momentum, which are Amoonguss and Nandabuzz, but Bronzong is a notorious momentum killer, and he's managed to use that really well as well. His team prep is honestly, it's just efficient and effective. It's never anything mind-blowingly spectacular. Like, he doesn't try and do the gimmicks like I just talked about and like Geo attempted. It's always just solid things that do what they need to do. He's not afraid to be creative, but he notices when he doesn't need to, or with things like Manectric when he's going to struggle to. And the big thing from this week is he had absolutely nothing for Druddigon, and yet managed to basically stop it from destroying his team. And that was really impressive. He'd underestimated it in team prep, I think. He expected a Rocky Helmet Rough Skin one because that's what Lars had brought a lot. And then when he calced and went, that's Sheer Force, Max Attack, Adamant, and realized that it was Assault Vest and the damage it was taking, he went, okay, I need to will this thing down, I need to pivot on it a lot before I can take it out with an HP Ice. Managed to do that successfully, and it was really impressive. I also really liked one thing which I know you're going to comment on, is not being paranoid about what his opponent could bring. Looking at the team matchup and going, does Sucker Punch make sense? Probably not. I don't think it would have mattered in this case, but it was nice either way. One thing is I just don't think his team is fast enough. Scarf Excelgor just...
No.
I know it seems a bit slow, in my opinion, to be a Scarfer.
Yeah, I think you need at least base 150 to be an effective Scarfer. And you don't...
Scarf Deoxys speed.
You don't know that I'm going to comment on Mono actually not being paranoid, but I'm going to comment on it. A coach listening to me, I think this is the first time that's happened. A coach actually listened to me when I say don't be paranoid on sets. Feels good. Feels good, man. Mono did Mono things. It's never crazy planning except for Scarf Excelgor because, Porygon Z, he just used really well. He knew that his opponent barely had any switch in Porygon Z. He just switched it in every time he could. He knew what he needed to preserve. He needed to preserve that Scarf Excelgor. It touched the field once, but then sat in the back for the rest of the game until he knew to bring it in at the end. At number 2, we have the Atlanta Holuchas. Now, Fizz, I said Mono was the first coach to listen to me. He's not. Fizz also listened to me, and you fixed your team builder. Is much better, and that's really the only reason I moved you up the power rankings, because, I base my power rankings how good your team builder is. But I'm sorry, Fizz, it wasn't good enough for number 1, so I'm sorry. He recognized Mence just tore a hole through Geo's team after one Dragon Dance, and he brought Outraged Dragon Claw sub DD Mence, which he doesn't need any coverage. He just sets up a Dragon Dance or behind a sub and basically can just kind of sweep through the team. Rhyperior turned out to be such a problem for Geo. This is one of the mons that somehow Fizz uses very well, and that's Rhyperior. I don't really get it. Rhyperior's not that great, but he's got the weakness covered up so well, and he's using it really well. And it's not that he used Aurork like super good and was able to kind of hide the fact that it was Aurork. He just let Geo kind of play poorly around it, and then it could do a lot of big damage. And it was a really close game. There were misplays on both sides. However, Fizz knew to preserve Mence until the end. I think had Manaphy come in, maybe it would have been a much different match. But Fizz knew what he needed to preserve, and he was able to keep that until the end, where he could just click Outrage and basically win the game. So it was a good game played by Fizz, but overall it was a game. I don't know.
It was a game.
It was a game.
Nice. The main thing with Fizz is he just kept the things around that he knew he needed to. Having a fast Taunter in Holucha, once he realized that Zapdos was an agility past Zapdos, he went, I need something to stop that from happening whenever I can. Kept his Taunter around, which is good. He also preserved Mence for late game, as you just said, because that was basically a win condition. If he could just get a little bit of damage on Cresselia, get one kill with Outrage, it was GG at that point. Noticing the Entei was shiny, it's one of those things that pretty much everyone knows at this point, but when you see a shiny Entei, if it has extreme speed, it has to be adamant. And so given Geo revealed extreme speed turn 1, I think it was, Fizz goes, okay, I know it has to be adamant, I know Salamence outspeeds. And even in prep, going, I'm going to speed creep an adamant Entei because he's probably going to bring extreme speed. I don't understand why he uses Rhyperior well, but he does. The only notable thing about Rhyperior is it's a mascot for a really bad YouTuber, but
Oh.
Other than that, shots fired. But other than that, he's been using it really well, is what I'm trying to say, and it's been impressive. There are a couple of things in his commentary where he was taking in hindsight into account a little bit more, but when he reveals agility, you notice that and go, I'm just going to keep clicking taunt every time Zapdos comes in just to stop it from basically setting up a sweep to beat my team.
As Fizz said, he's just going to taunt whatever the fuck's in front of him.
Exactly, and that was the right play, and it worked.
At number 1, and I'm sure all of you are extremely surprised by this, but we have the San Diego Chim Chargers at number 1, so why don't you take Envy?
What the fuck? Like, okay, I understand heat sets, and most of them worked, most of them have worked this season, but Hustle Togekiss? Just, why? Okay, so at level 50, max speed Timid Scarf Togekiss outspeeds a max speed Beedrill. I don't think it does at level 100, but I'm not 100% sure. You could have run Air Slash Scarf Togekiss instead of E-Speed Banded to deal with the Beedrill in that way. But, you know, I guess it didn't cost him the game at all. I just think there was a slightly more practical set and less gimmicky set for the Togekiss that didn't end up coming into play. What did end up coming into play was a really, really good broom, which is Rock Polish Donphan. And this is... MV's creativity is just through the roof. He's able to look at a mon which pretty much everyone negates to be, it's going to be bulky defensive Rapid Spinner, with Stealth Rocks probably, and then maybe like EQ Ice Shard or EQ Knockoff. And he goes, no, I'm going to bring Rock Polish and just sweep your team. And on top of that, he notices that Milotic can take Earthquakes pretty well. I'm going to bring another physical setup mon just to force Milotic to take a huge chunk of damage, and then use that really, really well in-game when he goes for EQ on the switch and then Dragon Dances the turn after when George considers him less of a threat. If he'd gone for Dragon Dance on the switch, he couldn't have killed Snorlax. Snorlax would have self-destructed and taken out Haxorus. Basically, if he hadn't swept up with Donphan, I'm not going to say he would have lost the game, it was been an open game still. And that's the big thing, is a lot of the other teams we said, you have this sweeper, you've got to hope that it works, and then when it doesn't work, your team is just screwed. Whereas MD manages to build teams with 3 or 4 win conditions and play them really, really well to the point where at any given point he has 1 or 2, he usually has 2 options to try and win the game. And most people get forced into, I only have one thing I can do to try and win this. And that's just mind-boggling, honestly. I mean, his team prep has been really diverse in the steps that he brings, but also a very similar theme, which is, I'm going to set up and force my opponent in on the back foot early. And that doesn't mean setting up turn 1, because everyone hates set up turn 1, but it means putting pressure on early, getting a setup sweeper in, seeing what their check for it is, weakening that check, bringing another setup sweeper in, sweeping. And that has worked every game so far.
You realize that Melodic was the only thing stopping the Donphan. Like, literally, that was it. It's just, oh, if I get rid of Melodic, I basically win this game. Because then Donphan just sets up and kills everything, almost one hit. Maybe the Snorlax takes a hit, but, you know, okay, weaken the Snorlax, weaken the Melodic, find a chance to set up with Donphan and win. And that's what he does really well, is setup. It's not quite setup spam where everything on your team has setup and he's just going to every turn. He uses it well. He has a very good forethought for the late game. What can I do to try to sweep up the team, finish up this game? What is going to be my overall win condition? And then have a fallback plan in case that doesn't work out. Really well played, and I don't think anyone is surprised that he's at number 1 at this point because he is the team to beat this season. So that is going to wrap up the Week 4 Power Rankings for the GBA Season 6. I hope you all enjoyed, you know, Trav's back, and I know you probably didn't enjoy that part, but, you know, he's here. So, I don't know.
They don't pay me enough to put up with you.
They don't pay you at all.
Exactly.
Oh. So if you have your own power rankings, please leave them down in the comment section below. We'd like to hear who you think is doing the best, and obviously that's probably going to be envy on every single person's list. But that's all we got for today. My name is Berk.
My name's Trav.
And we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.